All right, welcome to the meeting of the DPW and Fire Station Building Committee. Today is Friday, October 24th. I would like to present an update on what's going on down on our Central Street construction site. A lot of moving parts. So let's get right to the agenda. We want to do a Phase 1 construction update. And just for the viewers at home, we have two phases in our project. Phase 1 was to build the new driveway to the right of police station, to build a new fuel island that services all the town vehicles, and to build a new salt shed. And then Phase 2 is pretty much everything to the left of the police station, which is the construction of the new fire station, the construction of the new DPW building, and all the utility work and parking areas. So Phase 1, we got in the driveway, salt shed, and fuel island. Taylor is one of our project managers, the chief cook and bottle washer. If you can kind of give us a summary of kind of where we are and what we should expect in the next 30 days or so.
Absolutely. It's exciting now because we are actually into the nuts and bolts of the project now and out of the ground. In the audience is Anthony Fonseca and David Ambrose from Palmer Associates as well. They're the boots that are on the ground every single day. So if you do need any color or any more information, they're here to answer questions. So if you're kind of if I'm looking at the site, starting on the Phase 1 portion, the salt shed and fuel island portion, and you drive by, you'll see that the bioswales are formed at the drive-in. They were doing some curb work there yesterday in the street. The paving there will be November 5th. They're shooting to pave that. That'll be paving all the way up into the salt shed. So once they get that pavement done, they can start doing some interior work of the salt shed as it's going up. And hopefully that work will be starting the salt shed steel itself first week in November to really get that up. Hopefully by the end of November that's done, and we can move that salt over from our Phase 2 storage area into the new salt shed. So we're going to really be pushing them over on that side. So again, I know at our last meeting, we were talking about the issues we had with the soils and what we found. We'll talk more about that today. But we're through that in the Phase 1 area. We're done digging. We're done backfilling. The footings and foundations for the salt shed are complete. So it looks really good. It's really starting to take shape up there. They've started, or just about to start, retaining walls on that side as well. Our major stockpiles of soil are dwindling. We have a couple more that'll be taken off site now that we know that we don't need them. So the Phase 1 work is really coming together. We're looking for Phase 1 to be over sometime, probably I'd say mid-December to the end of December, to really have things buttoned up tight there. But it looks good. Obviously, the schedule was extended with the soil issue we found there, but things are on the right track now, which is great. And then Phase 1, Phase 2 on the left-hand side of the site. If you drive by, you'll see that the building up front that they've been working on is the fire station building. The other day they poured the first run of footings. They're pouring some actual walls today. And by the end of next week, they should have really all of the excavation for the footings and walls done for the fire station. So that's gone well. That's gone great as well. We did have a hold up there, just like Phase 1. Our Phase 2 hold up there was we discovered some old pistons and unfortunately an asbestos pipe that was buried underneath the slab of the existing DPW. So even though we did some destructive testing and some test pits under that slab, this was buried, years and years and years ago underneath that slab. So nobody knew it was there until we pulled up the slab and started, the excavation there. So, but we're through that. That's done. We did our aggregate piers before we started any foundation work. So that's basically where they drill a huge hole into the ground, fill it up with stone and ram that stone down. So what it does is it gives the ground some more structure and makes the building, give it a stable base. So all that work is done. And then in the back of that, you can't really see it from the street if you're driving by, but in the back, the DPW footings and foundations are complete. They've poured the slab on the administrative side of things. And steel back on the DPW will be starting the first week of November as well. So right now, I think everything's really hitting its stride in terms of, we have a set schedule now. Our schedule, again, was a little bit kind of not in the dark, but was going kind of day to day based on those unforeseen conditions. But those are through, and now we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Things are moving fast paced now. Like I said, with the footings for just the foundation, for the footings and foundations just on the fire department side, they just poured those footings Tuesday, and they're already pouring walls. So things are moving quickly out there now.
Yeah, I want to say, just in my experience, well, first let me back up. There's on-site work meetings every Tuesday for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 2 is meeting every Tuesday, Phase 1 is now every other Tuesday as things are slowing down there. And our project managers are there with the contractors, and they're going over the schedule every week, and any issues that come up, they're trying to get ahead of them. And I just want to shout out a little kudos to you guys, because someone from our committee, at least one of us, has tried to be there just to kind of keep an ear to the ground and what's going on. And I want to thank the fire department and the DPW, because someone from one of their departments has always been there too. So it's great because they have, people who can answer questions really quickly to kind of keep things moving. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of details, and it's going to be exciting for both the committee, but I'm sure for the two departments and for the residents to see steel actually get erected within the next month or so.
Yeah.
Coming out of the ground, as we would say.
I think the town's been very lucky, so even with, the unforeseen stuff, I think the team that you have in place, as far as the design team goes and the engineers, and they've been spending extra time at the site there too. But
Yeah.
they're there at every single meeting. They're spending extra time when things come up. And then I think we got really lucky with the contractors that we've had, both in the Phase 1 and Phase 2. Both contractors I would work with again in a heartbeat. They've been very helpful at helping us look at things a little differently, maybe, try different things, schedule-wise, work with us. So, you can run into different contractors that may be difficult in terms of, hey, we're not touching that until it's done, or we're not touching that until you guys clean that up, or, the schedule isn't starting yet until we can do this. But they've said, nope, we'll work with you. And I think we've been very lucky in that vein. The team, everybody really, from the town, the top down from the town, all the way through to the guys doing the work in the field. It's been a good project so far. So we expect it to continue,
And again, a shout out to the coordination efforts that everyone's been working with. It's unique where we have two different contractors on one site, meaning G&R Construction's building the DPW and fire station, and APC Construction with Dan Dell as their site contractor is doing the Phase 1 work. And they're right next to each other, and sometimes they're overlapping. And in a different world, it might be a problem, but these contractors have been great to work with. And we're working with the police department in the middle of it, and they've been very helpful. We want to keep them fully accessible for 24 hours a day, which everything's been working well. And I also want to give a shout out to our neighbors, our abutters, who have been just wonderful to work with and very, very helpful. So things, in that regard are going well with the coordination. I think we couldn't have picked better contractors. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that before we move on, but we also had some great news that the state has awarded a $1.2 million grant to the town of Abington to replace the Central Street water main. When this building committee just got started, there was a prior building committee, but after this building committee was started, the water department came to us and said, heads up, there's a very old water main in Central Street. And that was a big concern of ours because we're having our public safety buildings connect to it. But I want to thank Liz Shea, our town planner, and Mr. Donovan at the end of the table, Kevin, for all the work he did there. That work, I don't know if that'd be scheduled probably for sometime next year. So at some point, the water department and a contractor for the water department will be working in Central Street to replace that water main, which then these buildings will be connected to. So, good news in that regard. Anybody else have anything to add about the general, where we are, how it's been going? I don't want to.
I think it's, from our perspective, it's been so impressive through the whole process. You see some of these big projects going up in other communities around, and some of it's like twice the price that we're doing. I think the committees have all worked together great, and from us watching it, paring things down, being fiscally responsible with it, even when there's been some speed bumps along the way. And I can echo what you said, Sean. We're so excited to see the nuts and bolts go into the steel and see things getting erected, as things go forward. Can't wait to see the building process going on. But kudos to the entire committee for the diligence you guys have spent, especially the design teams and, the project managers and what they've done. Any little tiny speed bump, they've addressed it and really dug into it and found the best cost-effective way, because we see it all the time. So kudos to all of you.
Yeah, I mean, this is my fourth building committee, and there's been situations in other building committees where every meeting with the contractor has been a pull and take, where the contractor's trying to get every nickel out of the town, and it has not been that way with these contractors. In fact, they've been coming up with ideas where we can save money or save time, and I think that's why they have the reputation they do, so we're very fortunate in that regard. All right, enough of the love fest. Everything's going well. I want to thank KBA and Weston & Sampson. KBA is our architect and Weston & Sampson's our on-site engineer. They've been doing double duty too with all of these kind of coordination issues and trying to keep the ship moving forward, and thus far we've been successful. I'm just excited to get out of the ground and then to see the building start taking shape. But I do want to talk about the issues we did have out back near the new salt shed when we were doing the digging. People around town have heard about it. It took us a lot more time and a lot more money to dig out that area to get it flat, so we could have we could build our driveway, our fuel island, and our salt shed, and that we ran into just much more of an issue than we ever could have anticipated, despite the dozens of soil tests we did. So I want to read something just so I don't miss anything. If you bear with me, I'm a lawyer, so I'm kind of wordy. So our construction budget is extremely tight, and I must compliment the general contractors and the project managers who are working very well together with our building committee to try to limit cost overruns and achieve cost credits wherever possible, as it is also in their best interest to see that this project is completed. We just received another budget update report about 2 weeks ago, for which the first time we included almost all of the final costs for the Phase 1 work, which again includes the new driveway, the new salt shed, the new fuel island, and associated site work and excavation. Those excavated areas in Phase 1 proved to be much more costly and time-consuming than any of the site professionals, site engineers, and professional cost estimators had anticipated. We were aware that the town had used the rear portion of the site as a sort of municipal dumping ground some 50-plus years ago. Our site engineers completed at least a dozen soil test borings and dug over 20 test pits within our 7-acre site, including some testing in the backyard of the abutting residential property which the town had recently purchased by eminent domain just before the start of the project. That residential property was privately owned and had trees which appeared to be 40 to 50 years old, and thus we didn't anticipate that the town would have buried any debris on abutting private property. But we now know that the town did in fact encroach upon the private property parcel many decades ago. Thus, we became responsible to examine and sort all of the excavated material to determine the extent and type of any dumped debris or non-natural materials contained in the soils before they could be shipped off-site. There were also areas which had soils which were not impacted by any debris or contamination, and thus were perfectly suitable for use at other portions of our site. We had set aside money in our construction budget to remove up to 1,000 tons of impacted soil in anticipation that there would be costs to excavate and remove any soils which were not free of debris. Most of the debris found were remnants of roadway sweepings, parts of old telephone poles, tires, large rocks, small pieces of metal, plastic bags, etc. We did find and remove one old fuel tank that was buried, but we were fortunate that it was empty and fully intact with no leakage whatsoever. To be clear, we did not find any oil or gas spills out in that area, which some people might refer to as a hazardous waste spill or a 21E spill. There were no such spills there. Under current laws, a current construction project must now implement what they call a soil management plan for any excavated soil that is to be trucked away off the site and disposed of elsewhere out of town. All of the cleanest excavated soils were reused on-site for backfilling of foundations and to establish general topography and rough grading, which of course saves us money. All excess soils to be moved out of town needed to be sampled for a robust analytical suite of tests to identify reuse and disposal options before each pile could be trucked away out of town. This is what we've learned about soils and soil classifications, and we've learned a lot over the last several weeks. I'm just going to quote from a section I found of some DEP website. The classification of soils ranges from unrestricted use as the lowest classification, and hazardous waste classification would be the most restricted. There is no such thing as, quote, clean soil. All soils contain some level of various minerals and chemical compounds, and the percentage of these elements determines how to classify and where to dispose these soils. Typically, soil is either contains minerals and materials consistent with natural background soils or native soils, or soils may be classified as either impacted soil or contaminated soil. Impacted soil contains concentrations of compounds or debris greater than background levels, but less than the Massachusetts Contingency Plan release notification thresholds. That is called impacted soil. Contaminated soil contains concentrations of contaminants that are in excess of state acceptance criteria, but those soils are still not classified as hazardous waste. Under current EPA and DEP regulations, because our excavated soils were being shipped out of town to various disposal facilities and job sites, we were required to make piles of all the excavated materials, test each pile, send the test kits away for testing, and then wait for the test results to indicate how each separate pile should be classified. We would then have to send our test reports to the intended delivery site, wait for them to review and approve the test reports before we could start trucking the soils off-site. Depending on the soil classification, it would determine where the soils could be shipped. The cost to remove each different pile then depended on the soil classification, the fees to be charged by the company which accepted delivery of the soils, and the distance required to haul each pile. It was a long and arduous process and caused us to slow down our construction schedule, but our contractors, engineers, and public safety officials were adamant that everything be excavated, cleaned, loaded, and disposed of in accordance with all state and federal requirements. Those extra costs of sorting, testing, and disposal of the impacted and contaminated soils from that area were recently calculated to be just under $1.6 million. Thankfully, those soil remediation costs are now behind us, and the site is cleaner now than it ever has been in the last century. Unfortunately, however, those costs have almost drained our entire contingency budget. And based on this newest budget report, while we still have funds left in our budget to move forward at this time, we have serious concerns about our ability to finish and furnish these desperately needed DPW garage and fire station buildings without additional funding to replace those contingency funds. To be clear, every part of our budget is either on budget or under budget, with the sole exception of the costs incurred for unforeseen remediation expenses due to the impacted and contaminated soils which had to be removed from this town property. To provide the public with a little more detail by giving some examples, our site contractors encountered and dug up a small pile of buried roof shingles, which had to be segregated into their own pile and tested. The pile of shingles was no bigger than this conference table, but the old shingles were found to contain asbestos, so you can't just throw them in a dumpster or bury them like they did half a century ago. Instead, we had to notify DEP and our licensed site professionals, have DEP review the testing reports, then ship the shingles to a special site licensed to accept asbestos-containing materials. The discovery of roof shingles in the soil created extra costs and extra site work delays for our project. That one pile sat roped off on the site for over 6 weeks until all testing and paperwork was processed in accordance with DEP regulations. As yet another example, our contractors had to segregate the pieces of old telephone poles into another separate pile, and after having unearthed them from deep in the ground. They were too old and had been cut into various lengths, so we were unable to reuse them for any portion of our site. Instead, because we had to ship them out of town, current environmental laws were triggered and required us to hire a licensed site professional, which is an LSP, to evaluate the condition of the old telephone poles due to the presence of creosote, and to secure a licensed disposal location out of state where they could be shipped. We also had to remove some old pistons from underneath one of the old DPW buildings. There was a small release of some hydraulic fluid when the piston was dug up, and that required us to again rope off the area, notify DEP, test for any contamination, and then remove the oil in the surrounding soils according to DEP's guidance. Although it was limited to a very, very small area, the area was located right where we wanted to pour the fire station's foundations, and thus it created additional costs for testing, inspections, construction delays, removal, and disposal. We also had to remove 2 underground fuel tanks from under the old fuel island, which was serviced all of our town vehicles for the last many decades. All of our soil boring tests indicated no evidence of any underground fuel spill, and we were relieved to find that the excavated area was in fact completely clean. We paid to have the old tanks professionally delivered and disposed of at a regulated site. The money that we had saved in our budget from not having to pay for any fuel island spill remediation was then used to help cover some of the costs which arose from the removal of the underground pistons that I just mentioned. In general, a larger than expected percentage of the soils excavated in the northeast corner of the site had pieces of debris mixed into the soil. Each pile was not allowed to contain more than 250 cubic yards of soil in accordance with the required soil management plan. Although some piles may have appeared to be clean to the human eye, the presence of any unnatural debris would trigger the entire 250 cubic yard pile to be classified as impacted soil or sometimes as contaminated soil. It was never as simple as just scooping up dirt and filling up a dump truck to immediately ship it off the site. Instead, even minimal amounts of debris from stuff buried in the 1950s and 60s would now generate tens of thousands of dollars of additional testing requirements, expedited testing fees, increased hauling charges, and much higher disposal costs for almost each and every pile of excavated and impacted soils. We also learned that low levels of asbestos can be naturally found in soil or even found in water. When we typically hear about asbestos, we usually think about asbestos fibers from building materials such as old pipe insulation or asbestos shingles. However, there is also something called naturally occurring asbestos, or NOA, which is a natural component of soils or rocks as opposed to manufactured asbestos-containing materials. We found traces of asbestos during our testing of some soils at one location on our site, but after a series of intensive tests by our licensed site professionals as required by the current environmental safety regulations, the LSPs were able to confirm that the asbestos levels were extremely low and it was naturally occurring asbestos, and that it presented no health or safety risk to our site contractors or to the future firefighters and DPW personnel who will be working at this new public safety complex. Any potential safety or health issues were tested and retested by our site professionals under the watchful eyes of our project managers and employees of the fire department and DPW. We were unlucky to find naturally occurring asbestos on our construction site, and we were very relieved to find that there was no potential health threat. But the extra costs that we had to incur to halt construction to allow for more intensive tests were necessitated by our obligation to ensure that this site and the town's new buildings would be clean and safe for all future employees and residents. Knowing that we would be excavating soils from an old DPW sites, dozens of soil borings were done throughout the entire site by our licensed engineers way back at the preliminary stages of planning for this project and even before this building committee was even established. The original test borings on most of the Central Street site indicated no problems, and our recent excavations have proven that most of those soil boring tests were correct. Extra test borings were concentrated in that back right section or the northeast corner of the site, where we were told the town had previously dug out sand for use during snowstorms and other projects as far back as the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Some of the test borings indeed indicated the presence of impacted soil, especially in the area which had been owned by the town, in which our forefathers had used to bury some debris and materials which are no longer usable by the town. Using that information, the town planned for and budgeted for the need for extra soil testing, extra removal costs, and extra disposal costs. However, despite the extra soil borings and inspections performed by our engineers, after excavation operations were well underway, we discovered that that dumping area was much deeper than known, and that the town had also been filling a large part of the backyard of the private property which the town had recently acquired. No test borings had indicated that there was substantial town fill in the private property parcel, but those are the cards that we were dealt to our committee. It now became the town's responsibility to pay for the actions of our forefathers by cleaning up the site and by complying with all of today's environmental regulations, and we have done just that. I want to emphasize that the building committee and our project managers looked for any and all avenues to reduce our remediation and disposal costs. As an example, the building committee inquired whether we could transport several dozen truckloads of excavated soils with lower testing results to the town's landfill site on Groveland Street to help complete the landfill capping, which is currently being supervised by the DEP. Unfortunately, the DEP's timeline for that project conflicted with our immediate ability and need to truck the soils for the landfill capping process, so we were not allowed to utilize that option. Had the DEP approved our disposal of the excavated soils in the town landfill, it would have saved us a few $100,000 in testing and out-of-town disposal costs, but unfortunately, they would not allow it to happen. I think I speak for the entire committee when I can say that we appreciate the efforts of our project management team from Pomeroy Associates, who has scrutinized every testing invoice, time and materials invoice, and trucking and disposal invoice on behalf of our residents, and who has worked with the contractors to minimize or eliminate costs wherever possible. However, despite all of our collective efforts, the fact remains that we've incurred $1.6 million of extra costs related to extra soil testing, site cleanup, and remediation costs, which simply could not be avoided or be buried again for someone else in the future to address. We are all taxpayers in this town. And this is not a comforting report to provide to you, but we pledge to share information and updates as benchmarks were passed or when unexpected issues arose which we felt should be shared with town officials and especially with town residents. The support for the construction of a new DPW facility and a new central fire station has continued to strongly resonate throughout the town. And our building committee is committed to keeping residents updated today and throughout the remainder of the project. And as part of today's meeting, I'll be entertaining a motion to submit a funding request to the town manager and select board in hopes that they can formulate a fiscal solution which would be supported by all interested parties. We understand, however, and we want to make clear that an override is not on the table. Instead, it could be addressed possibly as part of a future capital plan article, or there are actually statutes which specifically allow a town to borrow money over several years to pay itself back for costs to clean up and remediate municipal property. We look forward to whatever solution will work best for the town, and we will continue to move forward with our DPW and fire station construction project, and we strive to complete this project as planned in early 2027. Thank you for obliging. I just wanted to make the effort to get all that information out to the general public. It's stuff that it's been accumulating the last few weeks, and now that we think we have a handle on it, I thought it was important to not only say where we are, but say what we went through and how we got there. And I do, again, want to thank Pomeroy and our contractors, frankly, for trying to keep the costs down, but the cards we were dealt just meant that we were required to remove those soils, and we've done so. We're all thrilled that we're now coming out of the ground. That means we're fine. The rest of the site was great. We were lucky about that, but that's where we are. Anyone have anything to add? I know you've all heard bits and pieces of it, but I wanted to put it together as a report.
Yeah, short of asking you to repeat that, could you include copy of that attached to the minutes?
Sure.
So, do we post everything on?
Yeah.
If you would be so kind as, so that it can be part of the record and posted so people can understand it if they wish to read it.
Yeah, I think the only things I'll echo that may just be helpful too is when the design team and the engineers go out on these sites and they do borings and test pits, and it's like in many ways trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? And I would say 95% of the sites that you do this on, what you find in the ground is what you find in the ground. And so you picture, you have this big site and you're just popping test pits and borings everywhere, trying to understand the makeup of the ground. And it's not only to find issues, but it's also to help develop the structural drawings along so the design team knows what they have to design to in order to make the building stand up. Right. So they're gathering that information, and they're also doing these test pits to understand if there is any debris or trash or things like that. And they did a really good job of doing that, and that's documented. And it really is that line in the northeast corner, like you said, that line of delineation to where it appeared that we knew where the fill soils were, and there was a native area, which is where the salt shed is, and that native area that was on that acquired property was just absolute junk. And if it wasn't for that area, everything, there would have been no issues. And we did some digging in that area, but for the most part, there was trees in that area. There was a house on it. So I think the design team did a great job of trying to identify any potential problems. And it's really been a complete group effort, like I said before. Everybody has really looked for ways of, okay, we know the most expensive thing is to get rid of these soils. It's not cheap, and it might sound like an easy thing to fill up a dump truck and bring it to one of these disposal facilities, but you would be absolutely shocked to understand what these disposal facilities charge towns to get rid of soils now. It is one of the most expensive things on these projects now. So we've found creative ways to keep soil on site. It may not be suitable for underneath the building, but it's suitable to backfill around the building. It's suitable to create a berm. It's suitable to create a landscaping feature. So I think the team has done a great job of trying to just find ways to keep as much possible soil on site to keep the cost down, because this thing really could have ballooned and got out of control. And credit to everybody that attends, you know, those meetings in the town. You know, when this first came up, I called, I think it was Sean, Kevin, and Scott, and we said, we went right into their office and said, you guys got to know about this right away. This is something that we need to get a hold of right away. And I think we did, and I think the town has, and I think we've done our best job at really trying to corral an issue that could have actually really got out of hand, so.
And I do want to add, just so people understand, with any commercial construction site, the engineers are going to go out and do soil testing.
Yeah.
Because as you said, usually it's to kind of determine what type of soils, because you have to excavate. Buildings have to sit on a certain type of soil. You want some hard panning, you want some good compactable soil. But if it's mushy soil or old parts of a swamp, which the front of the site was, you know, it defines how you build the building. This site, we knew because it was a former DPW site, we did extra, the town, our building committee didn't do the test, but the town did extra tests on this site. And as I mentioned, pretty much all the tests were spot on. And the areas out back, they said, okay, we know there's some issues here. It was, the extent of it was just far beyond what anyone knew, any historical records, what we knew, but we become responsible to address it. I don't want that to also just be a cloud over this project, because in all other aspects, this project is going very well. You know, we're excited that the steel's coming up in the next 30 days, everything's gonna start taking shape. Everything else, you know, around the majority of that property was clean and easy to work with. Our relationship, even with National Grid, has been working, you know, well. Everything's coordinated. The sewer department, the water department have been working with us. And as I mentioned, the police department has been very flexible and just great. You know, they bring up issues that we're not thinking of, and we bring up issues to them so that they're aware of what we're doing. But it is a concern of ours because, you know, we're by contract, we have to move forward with this project. We can't simply stop it. In fact, the foundations, as we mentioned earlier, they're already in. It's not like you can say, let's start over again. So, you know, I'm willing, you know, I'm gonna meet with go to the selectmen's meeting on Monday night and present this request. And it's not for the building committee to decide how much money might be available to supplement our contingency or how it comes up. There are much smarter people than me that can figure that out. And we will continue to work with it. And if it's not the 1.6, it's not 1.6, but we want to give the facts to our select board and our town manager, who are aware of it, but I want to publicly be there to let people also know, so.
Can I add one more thing?
You can add 3 more.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the biggest things you pointed out was the project is not over budget at all. So even with everything we hit, that 1.6 that you know, Sean mentioned that came from our contingency. So every healthy project has a healthy contingency for these projects. And had we not hit any of that, our contingency would be 106, you know, 1.6 million dollars, you know, better than it is now. But because of that, the contingencies had to be used to get through this this bad soil issue. So that's what we're saying, you know, needs to be replenished is that contingency to make sure we're going forward with a healthy contingency on this project.
Mr. Donovan?
Yeah, and I just want to point out too, that of that 1.6, we had 0 funded items in the budget, such as furnishings and other materials that ordinarily you'd find in a construction budget in order to have a contingency. So it's not the fact simply that we need it as a contingency. These are monies that we were going to dedicate back to the project in terms of what it should have been as far as equipment and furnishings. So I just want to make clear on that issue. And as the process gels and the building gets up and running, you know, the need for a defined contingency will hopefully be diminished, but keeping in mind, though, that we still need those furnishings. So in the totality of the 1.6, you know, this is the beginning process. And I like to say when we craft a town budget, it's a snapshot in time. The process gels once we've got more information, and there's nothing different from here. I think it's incumbent upon the committee to ask for what we feel as though is the number that is defined to the project. then it's up, then the process moves along, and then it's a question of, okay, based on that, can this be funded within the totality of the overall operating budget within the debt limit, or do we need to massage it a little bit? There's a lot of time between now and then, but I think the committee should be asking what it thinks it needs, and then it morphs into a different phase.
Yeah, and I do want to thank the town manager, Scott Lambiase, who couldn't be here. When we get requisitions, which are basically requests for payment from the contractors, they get filed every month or so. Pomeroy goes through it. It first comes to us as a pencil rec, they call it, where it's basically a draft. And Pomeroy will look at it and kind of critique it, make sure nothing's being either overcharged or charged for work that's not yet done, things like that. So they go over it with a fine-tooth comb, and then it goes to the town manager's office, and he has to approve it before anything gets signed. And that's been working pretty well. The contractors are getting paid regularly. Things are going great. And I know Derek, I want to thank Derek, because he's been doing a lot of work with all the smaller invoices that come through for whether it's dumpster rentals and pest control and rental of a work trailer at the North School. All those things go to our project manager, but they also go to Derek, so we have multiple eyes looking at it, and then it goes eventually to the town accountant's office for review and payment. So again, thanks, Derek, because that's another load on your shoulders. But so far, so good. We are on budget, but our contingency is nerve-wracking because we need to have more money, because there will be issues. There's no perfect, it's when you build a house, things change. You know, you can't run into things that the plans just don't jive or whatever. We're not looking for anything extra, not at all. We're building to the plan, but we'll continue a conversation moving forward with the select board and the town manager and see how they could help us continue to move forward. Anybody else have any other questions before we actually take some votes to ratify some things? Or actually, I'd like to ask if you could, someone make a motion. I gave you a handout of our request to be filed with the town manager and the select board to see what they would come up with a possibility of refunding our contingency budget so that we have the ability to continue moving forward with a little wiggle room. So would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Mr. Dunham makes a motion, Gordon seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0, thank you. Derek, if you could just give us a quick summary of all of those other invoices that you were dealing with. You gave us a printout of all the ones that you've processed through the town manager's office.
Yeah, so over the course of this whole project, there's been a lot of different things that come through that are not part of the overall costs that go to the architects or to our project managers. So these are some of the smaller invoices that come through, so we have to remediate getting rid of all those tires that we found underneath the ground. We had to cover the cost of removal of a couple trees. Pest control had to be taken care of. National Grid is one of the bigger ones because that has to get paid before they will do any of the work, so that had to move quickly. The engineering company that reviewed everything before construction started. Our dumpster services that had to contain all the stuff as we transitioned DPW from the site over to the North School. And then the modular work trailers that both the architects and DPW are using at the two sites. And then the last one would be the UTS, which is the civil testing. They're the ones that that all the testing that we had to do for all the soils, those invoices come back through us and we have to approve them and send them in. So over the course of the project, these smaller invoices have come to a little bit over $100,000 in total. And since our last meeting back in July, all these invoices just need to be ratified and we'll move forward.
Right, and just to reiterate, all these invoices that Derek was just talking about are all budgeted.
Yep.
These aren't extra costs that were unexpected. These are things that we have budgeted for. But our process is that the invoices get submitted to the project manager and to Derek. If they both approve it, it goes forward. So there's eyes on it, and the town manager then signs off. But I wanted to make sure that this committee took a vote to ratify the payment of all those listed invoices, just for the record. And again, this is nothing unexpected. This is all within the budget, but it is a process that I think we should just formally take a vote to ratify the invoices which, on the list provided by Derek, just for the record. So take a motion to ratify those invoices as presented.
So moved.
Bob makes a motion. Anyone to second? Gordon seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. I'm a positive, sorry. So 5-0. Thank you to kind of clean up that part of it, make sure that we're continuing to move forward. Is there anything else to be discussed in general? There's a lot of moving parts, but it's actually, the project is going well. Despite the soil thing, that was the only setback for us. I don't want to minimize it, but otherwise, I think it's exciting, and I think the townspeople in this building committee, between now and Thanksgiving, are going to see a lot of vertical construction going on.
I get, that's the question I was gonna have, if you could just make me, briefly tell us, in terms of, okay, the foundations are poured for the DPW, the steel is gonna be going up shortly for the DPW?
DPW steel will start the first week of November.
Okay.
And then by the end of November, early December, steel for fire department.
Okay, so the foundations for the fire department are being poured?
Now.
As we speak, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so people will start to see it come out of the ground,
Correct.
basically? Okay.
Yep.
And the salt shed, which is in the back far right, that steel will be going up.
First week of November as well, yeah,
Right.
that steel, all that steel's on site now, we're waiting on one more delivery. Yeah, next week, all the
Second.
steel will be on site.
That was it. Go ahead, Ken.
And so the salt shed, I guess in terms of operationally, I know we had talked about this before, about substantial completion and so forth and so on. So is it the estimation that they'll be able to, this will be the only winter they'll have to spend at the North School?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's funny, some of the,
Thank you, Kevin.
some of the things that we've had to deal with, one of the big questions was the cost of steel. Was there gonna be a tariff issue?
Right.
And that has gone from 20% to 30% to 50% to 25%, so
Careful after last night.
Yeah, and then-
It'll back up again.
last night he just announced a
Trade deal.
cessation of all discussions, so we're holding, we're keeping a focus on what is that impact.
Has the steel been ordered yet, do you know?
No.
Okay.
So, again, some of the things that you would never have expected when this project started 2 years ago, but it is, the cards were being dealt with. Anything else to be said before we wrap up? I want to again thank the fire department, the DPW, and our professionals for just really keeping the focus moving forward and cutting costs, maintaining our budget wherever we can. Again, as a taxpayer, we're all taxpayers, we appreciate it, and we'll keep trying to do it, and we'll have some future updates as we reach our next benchmarks.
Yeah, I think one just kind of, a funny little thing, I think the town should be very proud of who they have representing them at the fire and the DPW level. Our meetings that we have weekly on Tuesdays are the most well-attended construction meetings I think I've ever seen. It's standing room only, which is, when it first started, I was pulling my hair out saying, I don't know how the heck we're gonna run this, but it's great because everybody's there, everybody knows what's going on, and, the departments really care. Both DPW and fire really care about these projects, and it shows at those meetings, so something to be said for that.
Wonderful, then, without any further ado, can I take a motion to adjourn
Did you want to make a motion for your,
for the submission to the?
Yeah.
You already voted on that,
oh.
right? Yeah, we did. We took the vote to submit that proposed language to the select board, and we had the motion to ratify the invoices. So I think that's all the official votes we need to take today. So, except for the third one, which is the
Yeah.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Derek and seconded by Bob. Motion to adjourn, all those in favor at, what time is it? At 9:43. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks to Abington Cam.
Thank you.